I thought, well, I must be good. I'm getting all these parts. And
Hmm.
I'll never forget going in on a really big audition for a comedy. I think it was Charles in Charge, even. I think that's the show it was. And um, I had them laughing. I mean, I had them rolling, and I'm going, "Oh my God, I got this.
Hmm.
This was a no-brainer." And then my agent called me and said, "No, they were laughing at you, not with you because of your performance." I went, "Oh my God, embarrassing moment in life."
Hmm.
But a learning one. You always have to learn from the things you go through,
Hmm.
or you don't grow.
Hmm.
So being raised the way I was always taught that if you burn a bridge, it's really hard to go back over that bridge. So I decided to get into acting classes immediately. And 6 months later, it was between myself and Kelly LeBrock for Weird Science.
Oh my God. Okay. That's like one of
Yeah,
my favorite movies of all time.
yeah. I read for John Hughes 3 times. But Kelly LeBrock had just done Woman in Red,
Hmm.
and at the end of the day, the studio heads, they still get to make that final call. But
Hmm.
that's when my acting career kind of took off, and I started auditioning for, shows back in the day, TJ Hooker and Matt Houston and
Hmm.
Hawaiian Heat and all of those sorts of things, Fantasy Island. And then I started getting, small movie roles. Who's That Girl with Madonna, and 18 Again with George Burns, and
Hmm.
um, several others. But that's kind of when it hit.
So did you,
And
I mean, for you, like, obviously, I mean, like, when you got into the modeling, was that something that was your first passion? Like, was it something that you always said, hey, I could be a model? Or did
no,
somebody look at you and say, hey, you look like a model?
no. As a matter of fact, I never thought I was pretty enough. I never thought
What?
I was, no, never thought I was pretty enough. Never thought I was tall enough. Um, Actually, when I first was asked to go to LA to meet with
Hmm.
Nina Blanchard, um, very close dear friend of ours, took me out to dinner and had the heart-to-heart talk with me,
Okay.
saying how hard that industry is, and how basically they told me I wasn't tall enough or pretty enough. And I know they were saying it out of love, but once again, I'm one of those people where when you tell me I
Chance?
can't do something, kind of lights the fire.
Hmm.
And I just have that competitive part of me that wants to show them that they're wrong.
Hmm.
And that's what I did.
I mean, so for you, like, did you find it when you first broke into the modeling before you even got into the acting? Did you find it an easy transition? Because I mean, I know obviously, like, for anybody being in front of the camera at first can
Mm-hmm.
sometimes have a little bit of nerves. Did you find it natural for you? Was it something that you have to feel you have to work over time to get more comfortable
Like anything else, it's a muscle that you use. The
in?
more you exercise it, the stronger it becomes. I don't think any of us go into anything brand new
Hmm.
at the
Hmm.
top of our game. So no, I wasn't completely comfortable. I wasn't comfortable in my own skin, quite honestly,
Hmm.
because I believed what, people said to me as far as, how beautiful those women were. And I was modeling at a time with Christy Brinkley and Cheryl Tiegs and Christina Ferrari, who were just stellar and beautiful and elegant. And like I said, I grew up tomboy. I never thought of myself that way at all. It was hard to get me in a dress.
Which is crazy
So
because
yeah,
I've seen your modeling work, and I'm just like
uh-huh.
the fact that you even have that thought to not think that is like shocking to me.
I think it's interesting though, we perceive ourselves, as we've heard from those in our lives as we're growing up.
Hmm.
And, high school was a very hard place for me. You
Uh-huh.
know,
I know
you know,
that.
I recently went to a reading that Sean Kanan was having, and he talked about being bullied
Hmm.
in school. And I was one of those people as
Same,
well.
same.
It's like, wow, it was tough.
Hmm.
I'd be the one that was invited to go to a party just so I could be told it was a mistake
Yep.
in front of everybody to send me home, because I grew up friends with their boyfriends
Hmm.
playing football as a kid and being asked to come out and, play kick the can back in the day. And as we all got older and they got
Hmm.
girlfriends, their girlfriends didn't like the relationship that I had
Hmm.
as one of the guys. So
So,
it was an eye-opening experience to say the least.
so what, I mean, for someone that has been in that position, or even necessarily even right now, who is a young Kimberlin Brown trying to find her way, what advice would you give to them if they were going through what you were going through? What advice would you leave for them?
I would say do what I did. Don't lower yourself to their level, because when you do, you lower your vibration. We all operate on vibrations in life. I truly believe that.
Hmm.
And the higher you keep yours, the more difficult it is for them to drag you down. And remember, it takes a lot more energy to be nasty and negative and
Hmm.
degrade people that you really know nothing about,
Hmm.
just to fit in to a group. I was never part of a group,
Yeah, same.
and I would recommend that you do the same. Be your own person and forge your own way. Of course, you're going to have friendships, but when you're surrounded by people that are negative, that'll rub off on you. And those negative people are only being that way because they're trying to drag you down to their level. So don't let that happen.
Good advice. So like when you first made that jump, to Los Angeles, and obviously, in the business, you don't necessarily hear or see or find models that have had the success as a crossover from a model to an actress as you've done. Did you find when you started, did you find that transition, number one, harder from the modeling to get into the acting? And two, did you find yourself, what's the word, necessarily, looking at, is this something that I could possibly do as a career? Or did you just have like still those doubts and those self-doubts within yourself?
Um, I actually, at one point, I was so excited about the acting, and it was an easy transition for me only because an actress friend of mine, Claudia Christian, that I met when I was doing one of those five and under lines,
Okay.
she told me, I want to introduce you to my agent, my acting agent, who was Vicky
Okay.
Light. Vicky Light was amazing for me, absolutely amazing. She believed in me, and it was always coming down to myself and headliner. So
Hmm.
it's only a matter of time before that ceiling breaks, and you're propelled forward, as we all know.
Hmm.
Um, and then Vicky unfortunately became very ill, and she merged her agency with a couple of gals from New York. And when that happened, they brought all of their own people with them. And I went from, 3 to 4 interviews, 5 interviews sometimes a week, to nothing.
Hmm.
So I decided to get out of acting. Um, I was going to go back to school. My first love was always architecture, and
Okay.
I wanted to be an architect. So I was going to go back to school to become an architect because that's a long degree program, just like a
Hmm.
doctor. And I was going to sell real estate in the meantime to get myself through school.
Okay.
And the phone rang, and it just happened to be Jill Newton, head of casting from Young and the Restless, in the late '80s,
Hmm.
early '90s. And I had screen tested for the part of Cassandra Rawlings on Young and the Restless
Great
three
character.
years, yeah, 3 years earlier. And I didn't get the part, but she called me and she said, "Hey, there's this part. I think it'll be perfect for you. Will you come in?" And I didn't even have an agent at the time because
Hmm.
I left my agency. And
Do you remember where you were in that moment? Like where you were when you got that call?
I was living in Pasadena in my apartment, um, figuring out what I was going to
Hmm.
do. I literally went into Nina Blanchard Agency probably 2 weeks before and
Hmm.
told her that I was going to be stopping, that I was going to go back to school and become an architect. And she basically told me, well, if you leave, you'll never work again if you leave me in this business in this town. And I was willing to take that gamble and take that shot because architecture has always been a love of mine,
Hmm.
always. So I did. I left Nina Blanchard. I left my acting agent, and then I went to see, I had an interview with Harry Abrams, of all people, because Nina Pakula, who was my agent with Nina at the light company, Vicky Light, had gone there.
Okay.
And I went there and I was excited about that opportunity. And Nina wanted me. Joel King was there, who was also with the light company at the time. And it's probably politically incorrect for me to name names, but this is a true story, and
Hmm.
it needs to be heard. And this is what these people did to me. Nina Bakula wanted me. She brought me in, asked me to come in to Abrams, and I said yes, and I was excited about the opportunity because I'm loyal. I am
Hmm.
loyal, sometimes to a fault.
Same.
And I wanted to give Vicky Light and the Light Company that opportunity to show that they could still work for me
Okay.
the way that they used to. And when I realized they couldn't, Nina called. I said yes, I would go in. I met with Joel, and Joel looked at me and he said, "Are you sure acting is what you want to do?" And it's like I looked at him and it's like, well, that's why I'm here.
Hmm.
Well, it's such a hard business, and you might want to think of something else. And it's like, wow, you were my agent at the last agency and you saw how much I worked,
Hmm.
and this is what you're telling me?
Hmm.
And then when I went in to meet with Harry, he said, had you come with me when Nina first asked you to come, I would have taken you. But let this be a lesson to you. When somebody works for you and they want you, you go. I would have taken you then. I'm not taking you now. And I went, wow.
Hmm.
So glad that I came in to see you. And I got the call 3 weeks later to go on Young and the Restless. And that would have been a nice contract that Abrams could have negotiated for me. And
Hmm.
I think, like I said, keeping that high energy, that high vibration, it pays off at the end of the day. Those who put out that low vibration, that stuff's taken away from them. And that's exactly what happened in this case.
Well, I always believe that, a lot of times, look, as you know, this journey in this business, it's a bumpy one. And I always believe that, like, when you have either those setbacks or those people that are trying to put those roadblocks in front of you,
Yeah.
that to me, I don't look at it as a bad thing. I look at it as that it just wasn't your time.
Yeah.
Because you could have necessarily, as you said, you could have negotiated, you could have stayed, you could have done whatever earlier on, and either A, the opportunities may have been presented to you where you weren't ready, where, for example, you
Mm-hmm.
could have been casted as Sheila Carter, but as you know, soaps and actresses are revolving doors. There's many actresses that who are on a show now, 20 years later, but didn't start off as the original
Yeah.
character. So I look at it, that to me there's a sense of timing involved with everything, and I believe
Mm-hmm.
that that was a time for you to, I wouldn't say that necessarily like make your break, because I think you already were making your break, but I think
Right.
it was a time for you to sort of prove, I believe, in those situations, if you look at it from a different standpoint, is you're a fighter. Because most people would have cracked under that. They wouldn't. You've
Yeah.
already seen the bullshit. You already saw all the things that, like, what the business was.
Yeah.
And when you came
Yes.
into that moment, you're like, okay, you know what? I was already done with this shit. Like, I was already out the door. So there's really nothing you can throw at me at
Right.
this point that's actually gonna, like, slow me down. And if you're gonna give me this opportunity, okay, I'm gonna I'm gonna definitely show you now what, necessarily even for you, where if there was any doubts from them in the past,
Mm-hmm.
there's no doubts now, because here you are 30 years later.
Yeah. Well, and let me tell you what, it was that last experience when I went in for that interview uh,
Hmm.
that that really said, well, that's it. Then I'm getting out. I'm getting out. I'm going back to school. It helped me make up my mind, and it separated me, and I stepped away. And then when that phone rang for me to come back, and I told Jill, you know what, I'm going back to school. The timing's not right.
Hmm.
And she goes, well, what are you going to study? And I told her, and she said, Kimberlin, she goes, this will pay for your schooling. She goes, it's only 3 months and it will pay for school. You won't even have to sell real estate. And I said, okay, I'll come in. I'll come in and I'll read for that part. And I studied the lines. You know, I studied under great people, Catherine Daly, Creative Actors Workshop, and Scott Arthur Allen, rest his soul. And they always taught me to go in completely prepared, have it memorized, don't read it off the page, have the page there in case you need it, but give them a performance. Don't
Hmm.
just give them a reading. So I did that, and they had Peter Barton, who played Scott
Okay.
at
Yeah.
the time, who was Lauren's love interest on the show, and he was there reading with me. It was Bill Bell, executive producer Ed Scott,
Hmm.
writers, other producers, and I went in and I did the performance, and I got in my car and headed home and realized I dropped the entire middle of the scene, Dee. I mean, it was like, oh my God. It's like, what did I do? I can't believe it. And I didn't even realize it. I didn't, because everything flowed. I didn't
Hmm.
even realize it. So I called Gail Camacho, who was assisting in casting at the time, on my drive home, apologizing and asking her if there was an opportunity
Hmm.
for me to turn around and come back. And she let me apologize for like 20 minutes. And then she said, oh, and by the way, you got the part. So it was like,
Wow.
yeah. And it life altering. 3 months has turned into 33 years.
Which is incredible, which is completely incredible. I mean, obviously, like, we already know, and people, the viewers that may not know, you know how fast, obviously, the pace in daytime is. I consider it legitimately the hardest medium. I mean, I don't even know, honestly, how you guys do it. Me being a primetime guy, and I'm like, I love you guys in daytime, but I'm like, that's a lot of dialogue. So, like, for you, what is your tip or something that you do that helped you memorize so much dialogue, obviously, to get it all done in one take? Where, obviously in primetime and film, you have a lot more leisure and you don't have that option in daytime. Did you find that medium hard to adapt, to be able to get your lines and know them and absorb all that dialogue, or did you find it hard? And what was your process?
Well, first off, to give people an idea of what you're talking about, I mean, when
Mm-hmm.
Dee does prime time, and when I was started out doing prime time, you might do 7 pages in a
Mm-hmm.
day, and we're shooting, 38 to 42 pages in a day, and a lot of times 22 of those pages will be mine alone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of back to that muscle again. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. It used to be I could memorize. It would take me, like 3 hours,
Mm-hmm.
4 hours to memorize all of my dialogue for a day on the soap.
Mm-hmm.
And now I can literally, if it's only like 4 or 5 scenes, I can memorize all of that in less than an hour
Okay.
now. But I also know my character. I've had the luxury of creating her with Bill Bell Sr., and he always told me there was no wrong. There was nothing wrong that Sheila could do. She was the kind of character that could get away with doing things that nobody else could. And he said, Kimberlin, don't ever play her safe. Please keep her interesting. Don't ever play her safe. So I have that luxury when I'm memorizing my lines as well, Dee, because I keep coming up with just some crazy little wild things in my head to keep things
Mm-hmm.
interesting. So it makes it exciting for me still
So,
after
so
after
here's a
30 years.
here's a question then in regards to that. Like,
Yeah.
what do you find more important? The believability of the character, whether, because obviously, as you know, sometimes you'll get a shitty script. Like, it's just That just happens in the business. You get a script and you're like, what the hell am I reading here? And you have
Yeah.
to obviously try to make it work. But for you, what do you find more important, the believability in the character or the script?
I, for me, the character has to be believable. And what I do is I take that script,
Mm-hmm.
and I do the best with it that I possibly can. I take their words and I do my best to make them believable for Sheila.
Okay.
And if that means I've got to create some sort of a backstory in my mind to make those things work, that's what I do. For me, my character, and I think the reason why she's had such great longevity is because people do feel sorry for her.
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of made her that way. She can be incredibly evil, but people feel sorry for her because all she has ever wanted is to be
Loved.
loved
Mm-hmm.
and accepted. And
Don't
there
we
have
all?
always, yeah, and there are those people that have never allowed her to reach that plateau, to be that happy, to find that
Mm-hmm.
happiness and hold on to it. And when she has found it and had it in her hand, they wanted to take it away from her.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that kind of still reminds me of what we talked about earlier, the things that I experienced growing up in high
Mm-hmm.
school. Those people that didn't want to see you succeed,
Mm-hmm.
those people that refused to let you be happy. A lot of that is still happening with my character today, not with Kimberlin, because
Mm-hmm.
Kimberlin
Kimberlin's
is
good.
Kimberlin is good. Kimberlin is rocking it. I mean, she has found herself. So it's neat though to be able to draw sometimes from the you the line that has gone through my life
Mm-hmm.
and bring it to where I'm at today.
Well, I mean, you've obviously, you've worked with some power players, let alone my sister, Catherine Kelly Lang,
Yeah.
John McCook, a lot of power players in the business. Did you feel when you first, I mean, even in the heydays of the 90s of Y&R and B&B, did you ever feel intimidation at all when you first stepped onto that set to, with the legacy and the history, to be able to say, you know what, like maybe take a step back in that moment and say like, wow, like I'm a part of something that has been so monumental. Did you ever feel any bit of intimidation or level of pressure to make sure that you always are bringing your A game with the people that you're working with?
Well, first off, I always try to bring my A game no matter what. Like we talked about, once you burn that bridge, you don't go back over it. And
Mm-hmm.
daytime is such a fast moving medium as you talked about that you really don't have time to or the luxury to to ponder and take your time and try to make it the best. You have to try to make it the best right out the gate. Of course, I was definitely intimidated. I grew up watching Young and the Restless with my
Mm-hmm.
mom. She was a CBS woman, and it was As the World Turns, and Guiding Light, and
Mm-hmm.
Young and the Restless. And when I had that opportunity to be on the show, I was a fan of the show myself. I grew
Mm-hmm.
up watching it with my mom, and when I knew I was working with Lauren Fenmore of all people, it was like, wow, I'm being thrown right into the fire. This
Mm-hmm.
is exciting. So, there's that level of intimidation because I hadn't worked in daytime in that fast-paced environment before, and I
Mm-hmm.
knew I had to step up my game coming from television and feature films. And I took it head on. I enjoyed it. I memorized my work. I was set. I was ready to go. And everyone behind the scenes
Mm-hmm.
who may have sensed my fear, if any, made me feel right at home. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I I became quick friends with everyone behind the camera, and I also find that part of the business extremely
Important
fascinating.
and important too.
Absolutely fascinating. Hit your marks. Make sure you're there for your lighting people, for your sound people, for your camera people. because in daytime, time is money.
Hmm.
As in any production, time is money. But in daytime, we don't have that luxury of 10 takes. You're lucky if you get two, you're blessed if you get three.
Do you remember who you shared your very first scene with when you came on Young and the Restless, and as well B&B?
Um, Young and the Restless, it was, I believe, with
Okay.
Scott Granger, and um, then Lauren walked in. And then on Bold and the Beautiful, it was with John McCook when I made that phone call with the iconic crossover from Young and the Restless to Bold and the Beautiful, looking for a job in LA. And he just happened to answer his own phone because his secretary stepped out. I know.
What do you, I mean,
Crazy,
what,
crazy, right?
definitely, what do you feel though, like has been for you? Why do you think the legacy, obviously, of this character being so iconic, what do you think that, you know, has been your key, not only to Sheila Carter, but to just you in general in the business, your longevity?
Wait, I um I would just have to say playing it real, being real, and having your fans accept that character and feel for her and want for her and wanting to see her succeed. You know, I Kimberlin
Hmm.
want to see Sheila succeed, and I Kimberlin as an actress want to succeed. Back to that competitive nature,
Hmm.
truly, truly, and work ethic and working hard and having it pay off. And I'm blessed that I've got the fans that I have. I truly am. Even the ones that message me on a regular basis saying, "Oh, I can't stand you. I can't stand Sheila." But boy, I love the way
Because
you
you know you're
play
doing your
her.
job. You know you're
Yeah,
doing your job when you do that.
yeah. But I love the way you're playing her. So I'm doing something right, Dee, and I'm, always trying to be inventive, always
Hmm.
trying to spice it up, keep it interesting, keep it fun. I mean, this latest go around with Sean Kanan
Hmm.
has been a complete game changer because when they first started writing for us, I noticed that they were writing the same sort of way that they did with Mike Guthrie on the show,
Hmm.
played by Ken Haynes. And I had a great conversation with Sean saying, I want it to be different. I
Hmm.
want my relationship with you to be different than it has been with anybody else that I've ever acted with on the show.
Hmm.
And he said, absolutely, let's do this. And we both jumped in, head first, and we were able to laugh and be
Hmm.
funny. Things
That's
things our
Sean.
char- things our characters were never allowed to do before,
Hmm.
but we were allowed to do them with each other.
Hmm.
So I think, a big part of being an actor, especially after playing this character for 33 years, is to try and constantly come up with something that is inventive and new.
Well, as I told you when, you know, we had that conversation privately when I said to you when you came back, you know, you to me, just because of the way that the show had been written for so long, as you said, like a lot of the same sort of things over and over again, and you came in and you gave the show this bolt of electricity that was, I mean, literally, Catherine had that bolt, and then they took it away, which pissed me off. And then you were gone, and then you came back, and then all of a sudden, you know, the electricity came back again. Were you expecting or surprised by that call? And were you also, you know, surprised by how the fans and everybody else reacted and gave you such obviously a warm reception back, which led to obviously, as you know, some of your best work, which landed you an Emmy, which hands down we already know. As I told you privately, you won regardless. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care what anybody thinks. I don't care what the Academy thinks. they got it wrong. They always get it wrong. They will always continue to get it wrong because Catherine should have won it 5 years ago. Sharon should have won it 5 years before that. This was your time. So for you coming back after so long, was it a surprise call for you to get that call from Brad Bell? Or was it something that you were like, you know what, you always knew that some way or shape or form, I'm going to get that call one more again?
No, it was a surprise call. I had actually been asked, Casey Krzyzewski, the executive producer on our show.
Okay.
Um, he had called and asked me to come in for an interview, and it was during COVID, so everything was locked down. But they wanted me to come to CBS to do an interview for Channel 10 in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
The host, Angela Bishop on that show, had requested that I be there, and I said, absolutely, of course I would. And, I hadn't worked in a while. I had a severe injury that had me
That's
bedridden
right.
for half a
We're going to
year,
get
and
into it. Yeah, we're going to get into
got gained a ton of weight, and figured out how I could kind of disguise this as I said yes, and went to CBS, did this interview, and she asked me at the end of her interview, she said, Kimberlin, if the show asked you to come back, would you? And I said, absolutely, I would. I said, Sheila is my baby.
that. Mm-hmm.
And I would never say no to playing Sheila. And she said, well, we certainly hope they ask you because all of Australia wants you back. And I don't know if that sparked something. 2 weeks later, I received that phone call from Brad Bell.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to tell you, when you're my age, the phone doesn't ring as often as it used to. And you think that you're probably definitely in the twilight of your career, and lucky if that phone rings, and I definitely was. I was blessed because that's exactly what happened.
Well, do you feel that? I mean, do you feel obviously that, because I know before you got that call, you were obviously decided to sort of change directions in the sense of your path and career aspect, and you got into the political aspect, which we'll get into, where you ran for office. What was your decision making, and why did you choose to do that?
To run for office.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what a lot of people don't know about me is I actually put my money to work for me. My
Mm-hmm.
grandmother, who was a brilliant woman, always told me to diversify. She said, you never know where your next paycheck is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
So I took the money I made early on in my career and I invested in companies that I started with my husband in San
Mm-hmm.
Diego. And I employ, during the summer, roughly 240 people.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then during the rest of the year, off season, I employ, over 160. And I had employees coming to me, asking me, where their money was going. They were really concerned about their health care because
Mm-hmm.
I provided health care to all of my employees and they had really good coverage. And when certain health care initiatives were enforced, it changed everything for them. And
Mm-hmm.
they felt like they didn't have anyone fighting for them. So, I'm the kind of person, I don't care what party you're
Mm-hmm.
with. I don't care if you're a Democrat. I don't care if you're a Republican.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if you're an independent.
Mm-hmm.
I will back you 100% as long as you're doing what's right for the
Mm-hmm.
people that voted for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt in the district that I was registered to vote in that representative wasn't representing our district,
Okay.
and what definitely wasn't doing it in an honest fashion. And I'm from a business mindset where you do your research on the company. You check the numbers, you
Mm-hmm.
check the books, you check the balance sheets,
Mm-hmm.
and you go from there. And when I checked, the record, and I checked the voting, and I checked all of the things that were done by the person I was running against, I realized that they had really done
Mhm.
nothing. And I decided to throw my hat in the arena and give it a shot because I knew that my employees weren't the only ones out there that needed the help.
Listen, man, like Obama used to say, you can either stand in the bleachers and chirp, we can get
Yeah,
into the game and play, and
yeah,
my hat's off to you because a lot of people, they don't do that. They stand from a distance and say, well, I don't like this, and I don't like that, and I don't like that, and I don't like that, and this person is gonna, and it's like